Hi everyone, this is Yana Smakula and thank you so much for joining me. Today I'm sharing a set of Llama cards created using Spellbinders dies. This Llama die set comes from Spellbinders' new February 2018 Die Delights release, and it is absolutely hilarious. I paired my Llama dude with a few other older dies from Spellbinders to make these fun cards. I also wanted to mention a few things before we get started. First, I work full-time for Spellbinders as an in-house creative designer, and I get to play with many of their dies and other products at work. I filmed this video at home on my own time because I love these dies and Spellbinders products in general. Another thing I wanted to mention is where my inspiration came from for these cards. Recently, I've been watching some videos by Nicole Spohr. She's done some guest designing videos for Spellbinders, and her creativity just amazes me. The things that she does with dies and how she uses them together with other products like stamps and stencils is just so inspiring. That woman has some serious talent, and I'll link to her channel for you guys to check her out if you don't already follow her. Anyhow, she inspired me a lot to make these llama cards today, so let's get started. I wanted to make these into window cards, so I'm going to start by die cutting a circle and a heart opening in my card base and background panels. I've already prepped A2 card bases, so these measure 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 inches, and I've cut kraft cardstock panels to 4 by 5 1/4 inches, so just 1/4 of an inch smaller. Because I want to die cut a circle in both pieces of cardstock and have it match, I'm going to place the kraft panel onto my card base and tape it in place with purple tape. I'm also going to place my die onto the panel and again tape it in place. I'm taping everything down to make sure it's not going to move when I go to die cut these things out. Next, I'm going to open my card base up. You want to make sure to do that, as otherwise you might cut through the front and even partially through the back of your card base. And I'm going to run this through my platinum die cutting machine. It cut these 2 layers of cardstock no problem, and I now have a card base with a circle window opening and a matching card front panel with identical opening. I also want to cut one more card base like this, but using a hard die. This one is an older die set from Spellbinders. And again, I'm repeating the same things here and cutting this piece in my platinum machine. Super easy, and another card base is done. I also have these fun foam panels. This is just regular 2mm thick white fun foam. I'm going to add sticky tape onto both sides of my fun foam, and we'll cut a heart in one of the panels and a circle in another panel. I will use these panels to foam mount my background kraft panels onto the card base. Now you can totally skip this and use regular foam adhesive squares if that's what you like to use. I'm all about using my fun foam as it's very easy to do, and plus it adds that nice solid layer of dimension to my projects. In other words, there won't be any sagging or anything like that when I send my cards through the mail. So I always like to use fun foam to add dimension to panels like this. Now it's time to die cut the llamas. So I'm going to use this beautiful white cardstock from Hero Arts. This is 120-pound thick paper. It's much thicker than my usual cardstock. And I just recently started using this paper from Hero, and I really, really like it. I love my paper nice and thick, so this one is definitely a winner in my book. Now, this llama die set has several details to it. There are these open areas in the die, and these can add embossed details to your die cuts when you go to emboss this die. And this is what I'm going to do. So for this, I'm using a different sandwich in my platinum embossing machine, so my embossing sandwich, and I'm going to run this through my machine one more time to add detail to the die. And you can add this embossed detail to most Spellbinders dies, and this is what makes them so different and unique. Okay, so here's my llama, and you can see the added detail on the ears. There's a bit of debossing added there. In other words, parts of the ears were pressed into the paper. Then you have the embossed chest area and also the embossed hooves. And finally, there are these little line details added to mimic fur on the body of the llama. So already this die has a ton of interest and detail added to it. Here are the two llamas side by side. One is embossed and the other one isn't. And you certainly don't have to emboss your die kits from Spellbinders, but by embossing them, you do add that extra detail to them. One thing I wanted to mention, Spellbinders dies have special coating added to them that makes it much easier to release the paper from the die after you've cut it. But this also sometimes makes it hard to keep the die cut in the die for embossing purposes. So what I like to do when I go to emboss my die cuts is I hold my die cut with my fingers in the die when I lay my tin embossing mat on top of the die to make sure that the paper, that the die cut won't pop out of the die and it won't move. So this just helps me to keep things where they need to be. This llama die set comes with a few accessories. There is a blanket die that you can put on the back of your llama. And there's also a die that will cut the llama mouth, sunglasses, and a bow tie. And that makes it much easier to customize your llama and cut the pieces out of various colors of cardstock. I'm also going to die cut an Hola greeting for my card. This one comes from the Hola Margaritas die set. And I'll later add a Gracias die cut. That one comes from the Party Food die set from Spellbinders, and that one is a new die set being released this month. I've also die cut and embossed several cacti for my cards. I didn't show the die cutting part as it's pretty similar. I used dies from the cacti die set, and I die cut a saguaro cactus and a fishhook cactus. Now, living in Phoenix, I learned a few things about different kinds of cacti, so I can now tell them all apart, and you'd be surprised at how many different kinds of cacti there are. I've cut these out of colored cardstock from paper tray ink, and I used a ripe avocado and new leaf colors. To add some details to my die cuts, I'm using distress inks, and I'm going to add some shading around the edges using peeled paint and crushed olive distress inks. You can also keep your die cuts in the dies after you've embossed them and stencil through the dies to ink up just the embossed areas if you like. Also inking up the blanket and a yellow Hola and using wild honey ink. And I die cut another blanket out of raspberry fizz cardstock, and I'll ink it up with a pink raspberry ink color. I wanted to add some more color and details to my cacti and the blankets, so I'm using a white jelly roll pen to color over the embossed areas of my die cuts. And this really changes up the way that these look. Now, this fishhook cactus also has a flower die to it, and I'll use it later to die cut pink and yellow flowers to dress this cactus up. I'm going to keep my llamas white, but I do want to add a little bit of shading to them, so I'm using my Copic markers, C1 and C3 cool gray markers to add some color and shading here and there to help these animals look a little bit more dimensional. I'm also using the R20 marker for the ears to add a little bit of pink. I'm also going to go ahead and adhere the blankets onto the llama's back, and I'm using thin foam squares from Scrapbook Adhesives, so not the regular foam squares, but thin squares. These are about half the thickness, so they do pop things up a little bit, but not too much. I'm also adding white pen detail to the blanket. I wanted this guy to have black sunglasses, but I didn't want to cut another pair of sunglasses out, so I'm just going to use my black Copic marker to color what I have. And once again, I'm using my white gel pen to add polka dots onto the bow tie. To add detail to the mouthpiece, I'm using my Gathered Twigs Distress ink and also inking up the edges a little bit. I'm going to use the same thin foam square to foam mount this onto my llama, and then we'll use glue for the bow tie and regular foam squares for the sunglasses. I put my other llamas together in the exact same way, but I just used different colors of cardstock for the accessories. Time to start putting these cards together. I wanted to add a little bit of stamping to the background panel with a circle opening, so I decided to use this Sunburst background stamp from Hero Arts. I just used it recently in another video, and I mentioned how I didn't think much about this stamp at first, but after I stamped it, I really fell in love with this stamp. So here I'm using it again. I'm trying to align the circle pattern with the middle of my circle window. It was a little bit challenging. I ended up using my stamp platform from Tim Holtz and some tape along with magnets to hold the paper in place exactly where it needed to be. But in the end, I managed to stamp this image perfectly aligned with the circle opening. I suppose this would have been much easier to stamp the pattern first and do the die cutting later, but I didn't want to have to die cut another card base and another card front panel, so I tried to align the stamping with the die cutting that I already had. I used Simon Says Stamp Barely Beige ink color to stamp this. I did have some leftover green ink on the stamp itself, so my stamping ended up being kind of beige and green, but I didn't mind that. I mean, it wasn't too noticeable. Plus, that hint of green went really well together with the green cacti that I die cut to build the scene on this card. I used my foam layer to adhere this panel onto the card, and I also used scissors prior to adhering to take about 1/8 of an inch off from the circle opening, just to make sure that I wouldn't have any fun foam sticking from outside the die cut. And then I started building my scene using my little die cuts. I made sure to use 2 cacti of different colors, a lighter green and a darker green, and I also added my llama and an Hola sentiment. For my second card with a heart window, I didn't do any stamping, but I just foam mounted the heart panel onto the card, and once again I added my cacti and a llama. I used foam adhesive and glue to adhere everything in place. I was careful when I was adding my adhesive. I was trying to avoid the window openings so that the adhesive would not show on the inside of the card when you open it. I did have to move one foam square around a little bit, but I ended up placing it so that it was completely out of the sight. To foam mount the Hola sentiment, I die cut a layer of fun foam with sticky on both sides, just like I did before, and I used scrapbook adhesive sheets for that. So I ended up having an Hola die cut out of cardstock and another Hola die cut out of fun foam, and I used the fun foam layer to adhere the cardstock layer onto the card, and also I popped it up at the same time. For my heart card, I went with the die cut Gracias. And I also white heat embossed You're Literally the Best sentiment in white embossing powder onto black cardstock. And this sentiment comes from the Yay stamp set by Kathy Zielski for Simon Says Stamp. I added pink and yellow die cut flowers onto the cactus and embellished both cards using clear droplets from Pretty Pink Posh. I also made a third llama card using the same supplies. I only white heat embossed a birthday sentiment around the circle opening using my Simon Says Stamp Circle Sayings stamp set. Now, this video is a part of a blog hop by Spellbinders. Be sure to visit my blog to join the hop. There's a fun giveaway that you can enter to win store credit to the Spellbinders store. And of course, there's lots more inspiration using new collections from Spellbinders. Thank you so much for watching. If you have any questions, please leave them in the comment section below, and be sure to subscribe to my YouTube channel if you haven't yet done so. If you are a subscriber but are not receiving new video notifications, check the bell icon on the homepage of my channel to get notified every time there's a new video. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time. Bye!